Hi, welcome back to Inclusivity Podcast, episode 15, where I invite you to listen with your cup of tea. I am Leah, and we'll be co-hosting today with Dana. Our other co-host, Lori, is not with us today. However, we have a guest, and his name is Matthew McIver, Artistic Director of Iowa State Theater. But before we get started, we would like to recognize our podcast partners, Black Iowa News and Alliance for Sustainability. We invite you to follow our partners on Facebook. And while we have you, please like, listen, and share our Facebook group, Inclusivity Collaborative, where we share more tips and stories on sustainable living. And you can follow us on all social media platforms. Good morning, Matthew.
Good morning. I'm sorry. I'm just jumping right in.
No problem. Hey, it's about a good day, right? Well, we want to hear more about the origins of the Iowa State Theater and who you are and what your role is there.
Absolutely. And we're Iowa Stage Theater Company. So I call us a relatively new company with a storied history because we were formed from the merger of two longtime organizations in 2017. So Repertory Theater of Iowa was a company that focused on classics and sort of classic plays and from the canon. And then Stage West focused on cutting edge plays and new works. Those two groups came together and started talking. And in 2017, they merged to form Iowa Stage Theater Company. So that's us. Some folks try to confuse us with Iowa State University, but we don't have their money. Wish we did, but God bless. They're wonderful people. But no, we are a small independent 501c3 nonprofit organization here in Des Moines. We do professional productions, meaning we pay all of our artists. We don't pay a lot. We pay a stipend, but constantly hoping we can grow the organization and continue to raise those rates if we can. We take very seriously the fact that we are the child of two parents. So we have that classic kind of strain of what we do that's really important. Most recently, we just did Shakespeare on the Lawn with our partners at Salisbury House and Garden. So if you know that historic home in Des Moines, it is an absolutely beautiful place. And right on the front lawn there in front of that gorgeous building, we do Shakespeare. We brought it back this year for the first time since the pandemic. We did King Lear, which is one of Shakespeare's great tragedies. It's a family story, falling out of an older father and his daughters. And it's a Shakespeare tragedy, so it ends up a mess and everybody dies. But it is still a wonderful show, and honestly, there's such humor and richness in those classic scripts. So that's one aspect of what we do, is that classic kind of work. The other thing that we do that we're very excited about is cutting edge work, important contemporary voices. Now we're going to talk in a minute about Sweat and Lynn Nottage, but she is one of our most important living playwrights. Sweat is a masterpiece looking at labor in America, looking at what happens to communities when jobs get stripped away by corporations sending them overseas. What happens to people when friends fall out, when the powers that be play on divided loyalties between labor and management, when the powers that be sometimes other folks play on race to try and separate people. It's a powerful show. It's a new and important work from one of our most important living playwrights. So those are that is the overall what Iowa Stage does in general. I, as artistic director, am responsible for all the programming that goes on. I'm 100% of the full-time staff at the moment, so I wear a lot of different hats in different ways to make sure that this fine organization continues to grow. We're really fortunate to have a resident artist company, which is artists who have made a commitment to us and we've made a commitment to them, who help shape and grow our organization, who participate in our shows, who help with the load-ins and load-outs, who help set policy for the organization and pick the plays moving forward. This is not something one person does. Theater is a collaborative effort, and we're very grateful to that resident artist company and also a very engaged board of directors Y'all know, I'm sure, that nonprofits thrive based on how that board comes together and sets the vision and oversees the activities. And we're very blessed to have both a very engaged board of directors and these wonderful resident artist company as an organization to help us who don't have maybe all the money of an ISU, if you will, to nonetheless try and create award-winning, thought-provoking, heartwarming theater, which is kind of our mission.
Fantastic. So you mentioned Sweat and Lynn Nottage. Tell us more about that play and why you wanted to produce that.
This play is one that I have wanted to do for a long time. We were originally scheduled for May of 2020. We can all remember what happened that particular spring and why we didn't get to do theater indoors at the moment, thanks to the Rona, but we had to push it back. So we are finally, I could not be more excited to get this story in front of Iowa audiences, talking about working people. It's set in Reading, Pennsylvania. Now, this was a play that was Lynn Nottage's Broadway debut. Some say a much should have been on Broadway sooner than she was. Lynn Nottage, for those who may not be acquainted with her, again, I'm going to say she's probably our most important living playwright. Earlier this year, this is a woman, Black woman, lives in Brooklyn, New York, grew up in New York, activist parents, very engaged, went to Yale School of Drama to learn playwriting, and then out of that said, you know what, I need some real world experience. Let me go work for Amnesty International for a couple of years. So really broadened her horizons, is engaged in the meaningful issues of the day in her work and in her life. She's a force of nature. Earlier this year, Lynn Nottage had a straight play on Broadway, which is a huge achievement for any playwright. She had a musical on Broadway because she wrote the book for MJ, the Michael Jackson musical, that's still running on Broadway. And she had an opera at Lincoln Center up the street from Broadway, if you know New York theater geography. So one of her plays in Intimate Apparel, which Pyramid Theater Company did a wonderful production of a few years back. If folks know Pyramid Theater Company, local Black theater company, tell powerful stories. Tiffany Johnson is a powerhouse, their artistic director over there. Wonderful organization. So they did Lynn Nottage's Intimate Apparel. That's now become an opera, which was at Lincoln Center. So Lynn Nottage had an opera, a musical, and a straight play running in New York at the same time. I don't think anybody in history has ever had that before. Absolute powerhouse, force of nature, and incredible craftsperson.
Wait a minute, back up. You said she had an opera and say again? A play.
An opera, a straight play, like a non-musical, and a musical, all on stage in New York. The straight play and the musical on Broadway at the same time.
Wow.
Oh my God. Like, wow.
This is why I say probably our most important living playwright.
Oh, wow.
Right? She is a powerhouse. I don't think that's ever been done before. Now, she is phenomenal. Sweat is the play that won her second Pulitzer Prize, with Pulitzer Prize being one of the great prizes in drama. That had a number of Tonys that it won, and was her Broadway breakthrough, her Broadway debut back in 2016, I believe it was. Won the 2017 Pulitzer. Lynn Nottage is famous for the amount of research and detail that she puts into her scripts. So to tell this story about workers in Reading, Pennsylvania, she went to Reading, Pennsylvania for 2 years. Kept going back, making more trips, talking to more people, understanding what's happening on the ground. What do things look like now? What did things look like then? What was it like when you grew up? What are the prospects that you see for your kids now? What does all this look like? The play is set in 2000 and in 2008. In 2000, it takes place over the course of about 6-9 months. And in 2008, it takes course over about 5 weeks. And 2008 shows us the ramifications of what went down in 2000. So that's why she's got a hopping back and forth between those two things. You've got two women in the show who are best friends, Tracy and Cynthia, Cynthia's black, Tracy's white. They have been working together at a factory called Olsted's for 25 years, roughly. And there's an opportunity for somebody on the floor to become management, which doesn't happen. And they both apply for it, and Cynthia gets it. Well, this puts a strain on their relationship, and that strain only gets worse when things get worse for the factory and labor relations start to fall apart. And now we're on different sides of this question, and everybody's still trying to make $1 out of 50 cents and buy another gimlet at the bar where most of the action happens. And you see, one of the things I love about Lynn Nottage and I love about this play is she takes these huge forces, international capitalism, right? How do we understand what that means to people's lives, to people's boots on the ground? And she shows you in human beings, in friendships, in loss, in struggles with addiction, she shows you the costs of these huge policy decisions, which seem so out of our control, but at the same time have such profound impact on human lives. The intellectual scope of her work is at the highest level. Like, what are the broad forces that are defining the American labor market? What are the broad forces that are changing capitalism in late stage capitalism? But, nobody wants to go see a lecture.
Right. So it leads me to ask you this then, if you don't mind.
Please jump.
Okay. Don't want to interrupt.
I'll just keep going. I'll just keep going.
No, well,
you're going to have to jump in because I'll talk about Lynn Nottage and Sweat all day. So I know you probably need to eat dinner at some point. So just please.
No. Well, see, podcast is allowing me to not interrupt people because I'm always inquiring things. But you covered such a wide base that it kind of leads us to this question instead is how does working in these plays tackle race and equity through drama? How does that affect people's understanding of these issues?
I'm going to talk about this through the theater world as well. So we had in the theater world, which tends to skew politically a bit liberal in terms of the organizations and the folks in it. I don't know anybody's going to be surprised by that, but it's true. After we had that summer George Floyd, where all these issues, which had been around forever, got surfaced in ways that people kind of had to deal with, had to confront. And a lot of organizations then brought in, say, Black or other people of color leadership. It's like, okay, we're going to make some changes. We're going to bring some of these folks into leadership positions. But in a lot of situations now, what we're seeing is they were brought into situations that were kind of a mess and then didn't have the resources really to fix what needed to be fixed and start to have some struggles. And then some folks are saying, well, hey, but hang on, I thought we brought in this leadership to change everything. I say that, you've seen that a couple times in theater. I say that to say something happens in this play where there's a sense in which when Cynthia gets this promotion, which is a little bit of a spoiler, but it happens early, you start to get the sense as things go on that she's being set up to take a fall if things go bad. Okay.
Okay.
So
real life.
Real life.
Yes.
Real life.
Okay.
You bring in somebody who's a person of color, you bring in somebody who's Black, you put them in this position, and then you hand them this poison chalice of, you got to go deal with this now, and it's going to be you who's the figurehead for it. Right. You're going to be the one that ends up taking this fall.
If it don't work, right? Oh my God.
If it don't work, it's on you.
Yes.
Right. And if it don't work, it's on everybody who looks like you. Well, we tried and that didn't work. Right. So there's these layers and these games that go on, and Lynn Nottage is sharp as a tack. And that doesn't make me sound like I'm 100 years old, but she is a super sharp writer and has this ear for the details, for the specific challenges that people face in these situations where you've been working towards this thing all your life and you get there and maybe it's not what you thought it was, because maybe the people who bring you into their club are not who you thought they were.
Right.
Even if you try and walk into these things with eyes wide open, sometimes you can't even see what you can't see till you climb to that next level. So there's a lot of, and then there's the privilege. We had a long conversation in rehearsal last night about privilege, different kinds of privilege, because there's a two characters have a frayed relationship, and one of them starts making racist comments like, "Well, you just got that job because you're black," and that kind of stuff that's coming out. These are people who've been friends for 25 years, right?
But your biases are still coming through at the end of the day.
Sometimes it shows, you know.
Especially when you have the struggle of money, when money and you know, different positions come into play. Yeah, that's going to, you know, bring that out.
And part of privilege, part of white privilege in particular, is a sense of entitlement, is a sense of that should have been me.
Okay,
right?
Matthew, let's preach today. All right.
Well, let's just call it what it is, right? You know, you know, folks who look like me, and I don't know, do they see the video on the podcast?
If they watch on YouTube, yes, but if they're like audio listeners, no.
If you watch it on YouTube, you know I'm a white man, and most of the people who've been in charge of most of the stuff in this country have looked like me for most of the time, and that's just a fact. So it's always been a thing for me to feel like I could be in a leadership position somewhere, because you look around and most of those folks look like me, but that doesn't mean that it should be me. It doesn't mean that I shouldn't have to work as hard as everybody else. You know, to folks with privilege, equality can feel like a loss. Right. And I think that there's also a really subtle way in which for white folks, the idea of white privilege for folks who have hard lives.
Yes, that part.
Right. They're like, well, I don't have white privilege because you know I had to struggle all my life.
Right. Didn't nobody pay for me to go to school, and I got this house, and I got this, and I'm like, yeah, but you got the opportunity, and your opportunity didn't come covered in. You're gonna fail. Because every time you get in that position of something, it's always, you know, well, you didn't know, but my background is engineering, and I would often get projects and would get no kind of how to figure it out. And so I'll go finish and I'll have everything done, and it will be a look of shock because my design folder is neat and all that stuff. And then the question would be, well, how did you figure it out? And I'm like, oh, so you pretty much, I was very vocal if you didn't know, but I'm like, so you pretty much knew you didn't give me enough information to figure it out.
Snap.
But when I did, it was like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, because when we had a little sidebar before we got on here, Matthew is from Greensboro, North Carolina, and I got to talk about being from Winston-Salem. But at any rate, being at a HBCU, you're taught how to think through your processes versus just knowing the answer. And so I'm like, I was groomed to do this. You can figure it out. But I love knowing that this playwright was able to capture that by having the different timelines, and then having that what you call it, protagonist and antagonist in theater, being two friends whose values, it sounds like, comes out, and this is stuff people see, you know. Because I have been told that, well, you know, you just got asked because you're Black, or you know, you were put in this position, and I'm like, it's so defeating when you say, Dana, like, why is my credibility not good enough? Like, I'm good at my job. What do you mean?
Right. I mean, as a Black woman, I'm sure you're just used to things being handed to you. It's
right. Of course, yeah, it just falls in the sky, you know.
It does,
if you're listening to this on the audio, you need to go on YouTube and see the face that Dana just made. The face that Dana just made is a whole story in itself. So yeah, and then we also see in this play, we see them. These are women who are 45 in 2000, and they have 20-year-old sons, 21-year-old sons who are also working at the plant. And then we see how this gets handed down generationally, and the strains when there's labor strife. What happens to these families when there's labor strife, when there's a strike or a lockout? There's so much that goes into this show, and she's such a tight concise writer. There's a thing in theater and film and TV too, where they talk about you want to get into the scene as late as possible and out of the scene as early as possible. It means you don't want any excess stuff at the beginning. And when you have hit the point that you need to make, you need to get out of there. Lynn Nottage is one of the tightest writers in that sense that I've ever worked with. Just absolutely fantastic. The last play I directed was by Eugene O'Neill, who is not that. He will go on for 4 or 5 pages, and then you hit the point, you're like, oh, there it is. But she is an extraordinary craftsperson in that sense. So to your point, Leah, it's the needing to prove more and more, like overprove, overcome those intentional hurdles that get set up in front, and then for one of these characters to get there, to get that promotion, to get that next month on the ladder, and then it ends up not being a good thing in a lot of ways, for just rough reasons. Now I'm making it sound like it's all grim and dark, and there's real talk in this show. There's real things that we're talking about in this country, in this world. It's also, these people are funny. These people are vibrant. These people are scrappers and fighters, all of them. Every single one of them has worked hard. We were talking.
But you need that in reality. I often, a lot of times, I'll use Chappelle. He's one of my favorite comedians, and he gets scrutinized for telling the truth. And I laugh about how I've even been told myself that, oh, well, Leah, we can hear it from you because you say it with a little bit of humor. And I'm like, why do I have to talk about I'm low-key hurt, but I got to tell it to you with a smile and be unaffected when deep down inside I'm hurt. I lost an election this year. And as I sit and ponder, do I do it again? And people not understand that these issues are still here. Just because you're not in that thing that brought you the passion doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. I'm sure Dana, her background is in journalism. Our different journeys are so similar when you're getting in these fields that are not, predominantly Black. There's nobody like you. And you're being put in positions that, you wouldn't consider. Like, I'll never forget, know how much you're familiar with Iowa, but the Centerville, Iowa. And for anybody that don't know, Centerville, Iowa is like, there's nothing there. And it's definitely like,
they're gonna love to hear that.
Right. And it's definitely none of me there. And if it's changed in 2022, but going down there in 2001, I was like, oh my gosh. And when I got sent to work in that area, I was like, oh yeah, they're really trying to get rid of me. They do not want me to work because I'm down here in this. And I'm like, I feel the fear now. Like, the trauma is still there because I'm going out in these rural woods and it's nobody around. Cell phone signal doesn't work. So if something happens to me, I'm gone. Don't nobody know where I'm at, but I will say again, the humor and how to talk and relate to people goes over much better. And sometimes I have maybe made the thing worse, but a lot of times I was able to connect. But underlining, though, was still me, I guess, having Black privilege, because at the time, my supervisor who ran the state, he was a Black man. And so it was, oh, you just got the job because of him. Not, you have the job and you're qualified and you know what you're doing. You know what I mean? Like, when you keep going through those stuff. So, man, this play sounds so great. I'm ready to go watch it. I wish it was a way to watch it virtually or hear it. It's about to come a movie. Like, that sounds so relatable.
I think it is. And to your point too, the fact that you and Dana, I don't know how much crossover there is in the experience of what an engineer does all day and what a journalist does all day, but those are pretty different fields. And for the two of you to have similar feelings or experiences or career paths or opportunity, experiences in that sense, speaks to those underlying issues. And then I think both of you would be able to watch this play, this woman who's working in a factory, packing steel tubes, and connect again with that experience. I do think it's relatable, to use your point there. I think It's a very relatable play, and I think this is a play that I really want people to come see. I want there to be a conversation around it. I think it's an important play. I think it talks about the world that we live in for real, and I, as much as we had that summer of George Floyd, I don't know how
Right.
different that world really is right now as
Not
compared to how it
much.
was in 2000, 2008, you know,
I think in two,
1988.
I think in 2000, 2008, that's an interesting time period that most people are going to remember because,
Hmm.
you had the housing market burst.
Hmm.
You had people's life savings, their 401k stolen.
Y2K.
You
Oh
had
my
all of
God.
that going
Yep.
on. So, even I've worked with like some millennials and, they're super interesting to talk to because their worldview was really formed by losing, seeing their parents losing their homes and having to move and take lesser paying
Hmm.
jobs, like a lot of like their belief system, not wanting to necessarily purchase homes or having a different view of the employee employer relationship,
Hmm.
really stems from that time period. And I remember that time period too, because 2008 would have been the only time in my life that I could not find a job in Des
Hmm.
Moines at all. And here I've, got a 4-year degree, which is a rarity, should have been able to, I couldn't get a job working at Goodwill at that time. Like just nothing was moving. So though that 6 months that I experienced that in 2008, when you said that, it was like, wow, there's a lot from that era that really stands out. And it really resets a lot of people who had risen to a certain point in their career. And
Yeah.
then, boom, the capitalistic forces, knock you back down. And you got to start all the way over,
Yeah.
working your way back up. And then you get to this point, you're like, well, where are we going? Where, what's most important? It sounds like this
Hmm.
play gets at some of that, those relational type things that
Hmm.
really are what it's all about, not the materialistic type things. So
Yeah,
yeah, so I want to
absolutely.
know more about how you cast something like this. Tell us about the cast. How does that work?
That's a great question, Dana. And the most important thing when we're looking at a play, so we as a company, we want to try and tell plays that reflect our community and that deal with these kinds of issues. Um, at the same time, full disclosure, we're a predominantly white organization, and we grapple with those issues as well. So when we're looking at a play like this, the most important question is the first most important question is this play worth doing? The second most important question is, do we have the folks who can do this play? Can we find those folks? We are very fortunate. I am working with Davita Williams, is a wonderful actor who was in Intimate Apparel when the Lynn Nottage play The Pyramid did some years ago. She and I have worked together before on other things as well. We did a reading of this play back in probably 2019. Um, we did a reading of Sweat, thinking about putting it in the season. Actually, in 2019, maybe 2018. We did a reading of it, thinking about putting in the season, and we were able to pull together some great folks. So, our resident artist company that I mentioned, we've got Alyssa Cheddar-Sidslaw, who's playing Tracy in this, is a wonderful actor. Jennifer Hughes, another member of our resident artist company, plays Jessie. Um, Aaron Smith, who has done a ton of work, he's one of Pyramid's artists, is playing Brucey, who's Cynthia's husband, Davita's character's husband. I don't know that Davita has ever played a married character who wasn't married to Aaron, so that's kind of funny. Um,
It's
then
so
back,
funny because I went to college with Davita and Aaron.
okay,
And
okay,
yep, I went to college with them. And then Aaron and I, when I was in college, I was the managing editor of the student newspaper. And one of our friends in
sure.
common tricked me into going, they needed somebody to, try out for Raisin in the Sun. And I said, I
Okay,
don't have time. I'm managing editor of this newspaper. I'll come. Just give me some little bit part and we'll be good. And they suckered me into being mama. So
Ah,
I had all of these lines. I'm trying to run a newspaper and learning all of these lines, but it was, one of the like best experiences of my life, working
oh,
with,
that's
all of
fantastic.
them. It was
I'm
so much
over
fun.
here like, okay, Dana, tell me more. Like, what? You was in a
Right?
whole play,
Yeah, it
raising
Right?
was
the
great. And
son?
then and Aaron was gosh, what's the name of the main character? It's
Oh,
not
I'm gonna
coming to me.
forget. I'm
The
embarrassed. Yeah.
Oh,
son. Oh,
yeah, the son. Was it
Yeah.
Walter? I feel like
Yeah.
it's Walter.
Walter Lee.
Yeah,
Walter
Walter
okay,
Lee.
Lee?
yeah.
So he was,
Walter Lee.
and he was so phenomenal in that role. He's phenomenal in everything he does. So
Yeah.
yeah, you've got
He's
some great
wonderful.
people then.
Well, and we're fortunate too. So I directed a play called A Soldier's Play, which if you go on the Pyramid website, technically when Pyramid launched, their first play was Raising the Sun. Tiffany directed, but they have two plays before that on their production history: Fences and A Soldier's Play, that were
They did
produced before.
Fences?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
And the soldier
20.
story that's turned into a movie. That's
Yeah.
the famous one that like the soldiers killed the
Yep. The
okay.
sergeant. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing film. And Aaron was actually the horrible sergeant in that production. And a guy named Jerry Brantley was in that play, Private Wilkie, and he's plays a parole officer in this one. And we've got two great young actors who were just in King Lear with us, Alex Wendell and David Robinson, who play the sons that I mentioned earlier. And then another resident artist company member, Tom Garrity, plays Stan, the bartender. And then Edward Vasquez plays Oscar, who's a Colombian guy, works as a bar back and figures into the plot in some interesting ways down the road. So we're really lucky to have this cast. We do also, as a company, we hold auditions. We're going to be holding auditions for A Christmas Carol, which is coming up in December. So folks can go to our website, iowastage.org. That's iowastage.org, and check out that information when we post that in a little bit here. So we are always, we have a wonderful resident artist company, but at the same time, the stories that we want to tell, we can't tell with just our resident artists. We've got a bigger appetite than that group could do just on its own. So we're blessed to have some wonderful guest artists in this community who are incredibly talented, hardworking, thoughtful, passionate folks who do just some extraordinary work. I mean, if you went to college with Davita, she's been doing this wonderfully for a long time. Aaron too, and the other folks in here are just top notch as well. I'm super excited about this cast and about this story. So yeah, it's Des Moines is kind of wonderful in that way. And
Mm-hmm.
we try to be thoughtful, because we've got Pyramid in town and they're telling these wonderful stories. But there's some stories so there's a lot of stories that we might read it and they're like, that's a terrific play, but that's a Pyramid play. So that's something they should be doing, and that's their space.
So you're learning like how to line up what aligns with you and what okay and what doesn't. So
Yeah.
Matthew, I hate
Yeah.
to go, but I would love if you would come back to us at some point and talk more. We're definitely going to post out the organization for anyone that was interested in auditioning to come out for Christmas. And let me see what else. Then my closing question for you is,
Yes.
I think, did we ask you already? I think, where do we get our tickets?
No, not yet.
No, we don't have the date, time, date, place, ticket costs. We need all that good stuff.
I got you. So we have iowastage.org as our one-stop shop for all information about Iowa Stage Theater Company, our productions, and how to get involved. So if you go to that website and click on the splash page, should take you to Sweat. If you pull down the shows menu, it should, next production, Sweat should be up there. All of those are available to you. We are going to have information shortly about our production of A Christmas Carol, which is happening in December. To answer your other question, I would love to come back. Y'all are so much fun. I'd love to come back and talk more about Christmas Carol. And we're going to be announcing in October our 2023 season of plays, which I will say includes a rediscovered classic play that should have been the first play by a Black woman on Broadway, but she wouldn't rewrite it for the white producers to get more comfortable with it. So,
I love it. We ain't gonna make it. Okay. All right.
So we got that coming up in 2023, and when the season comes out, I'd love to talk more with you all about all of that.
Okay.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing, what's happening with your company. And I'm just looking forward to learning more and seeing some of your cool plays that you have coming up.
Well, thank you both so much. Dana knows I'm a fan and subscriber of Black Iowa News and appreciate what you guys do in the community and the perspective that you bring for everyone here. And I thank you for the opportunity for me to rattle on and on about these wonderful playwrights and artists and stories.
All right. Well, we thank you for that, and hope you will follow us we have an Inclusivity page where we're going to be where we promote our episodes and who we've talked to, and looks like we can promote the Iowa Stage Theater Company that you're the artistic director of as well.
Yes, absolutely.
So I want to say thank you, Matthew McIver, for coming with us today, and hope that our listeners will tune in next week on episode 16. And we would like you to please share, like, and review our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, just to name a few. And we appreciate our partners, Black Iowa News and Alliance for Sustainability. And for more information, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Thank you.